Hello, everyone. So that's it, my first reading in English of the Spiral book. So, first of all, this book was written first in English, all right? I have two versions. I'm waiting for the French one right now, but I have two versions here. I have one that is the Spanish one, all right? You have these bands around because I paid it like with production costs, from Amazon. And honestly, I'm probably not going to read too much this one anymore. And I'm going to explain you why. And I have the English book again and again. I'm not going to read it too much. Why? Because these versions they are a bit old. What I mean by old is that basically when I did the French version, I've been correcting left and right these two versions, and I want to read you the last versions of the text. Therefore, I am going to do it from my phone because it exists as well as an ebook. All right. So I know it's a bit different, but again, I'm not against doing like several readings, or maybe I will buy another version of the book whenever I have the money, because for now no one is buying the book. So anyway, I'm going to start right now opening the file, and I'm going to read it for you. I've been back and forth. I've been going back and forth between the idea of putting music in the background. So please, I'm going to do it without music this time. But tell me if you prefer have one in the comments. And we have like some works in the flat just underneath. So that's a bummer. But again, it's a first trial. Okay. The Spiral Book, The Five Humans. This book is protected under US and international copyright law. No part of this book may be reproduced, distributed, or transmitted in any form by any means, including photocopying, recording, or other electronic or mechanical methods, without the prior written permission of the author, except in the case of brief quotation used in reviews or articles. This is the work of fiction. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or real events is purely coincidental. First published February 6, 2025. 6th. One book in English for the wide world. One book in Spanish for the friends of the capital. One book in French for the family on the cold coast. There is no science without fiction. There is no philosophy without fantasy. Science fantasy shall give birth to spinometry. For my family and my friends, and for the people I love and respect, you shall forever be a star in the spiral. Author's note. This work is the result of extensive human authorship, where AI-assisted tools were used in the refinement process. The final composition, structure, themes, and creative visions are entirely directed by me as the author, with AI serving as a tool rather than an independent creator. Throughout the writing process, I maintain full editorial control, modifying, rewriting, and shaping the manuscript over multiple iterations. I have a vision, okay? Introduction to the English edition, April 2025. This original version was born in English because, for better or worse, the language of science fiction always came to me in English. The works that shaped me, the ones that opened inner galaxies for me, often came from powerful American voices or British authors with their sharp metaphors. Even fantasy, though more diluted, filtered in through that same channel. Because this book, at its core, it is about transformation, about multiple identities, about impossible synthesis, about what is lost and what is gained when one changes form. There is another point I want to highlight. This edition also represents something important to me as a creator. It is part of her personal manifesto, a quiet statement that creativity and technology are not enemies. When I finished the English version, it was a real challenge to legally register the work, to explain the process, to fight for its legitimacy. But today, in April 2025, just a few days before my birthday, both the US Copyright Office and the Intellectual Property Registry of Madrid have recognized this work, fully aware of how it was made. So, dear reader, if at any point this book sounds strange to you, if a word seems out of place or an expression throws you off, perhaps that is so. But I invite you to see it as a part of the content itself, as an echo of the very themes the story explores, as a spiral in its own right. On censorship and the absence of a professional editor. You may wonder why no professional editor was involved in this process. The answer is deeply connected to the very essence of this project. The spiral book, in this English version, the Spanish one made afterwards, and the upcoming French one, is also a small personal manifesto. A quiet declaration that another kind of author is possible. An author who, if they so choose, can present their truth to the world. Raw, direct, unfiltered, uncensored. Without passing through the traditional gates that often say, that is not what the market wants, this is not how things are done, or let me tell you how your voice should sound to be accepted. I wanted to prove first to myself and then to anyone who might see it that if someone has a truth they wish to share, they can. Without an editor, without a beta reader, without a translator, supported by the guidance of artificial intelligence as a helper, offering something authentic, even if that means accepting certain risks. Small formatting glitches, a few rebellious typos, a touch of roughness at the edges. It was a challenge I set for myself with this first book, to embrace the risk of imperfection in exchange for preserving what is true. I know not everyone will agree with this choice, and that's alright. I never intended to create a flawless product. I wanted to create something alive. Something that breathes transformation, vulnerability, and the beauty of trying, even knowing the result might not be polished or fully correct. Because the spiral book is not about perfection. It's about transformation, about moving forward, even imperfectly. Revised edition, September 2025. This book was born in English. Why? Perhaps because so many of the stories that shaped me came to me in this language. From the towering voices of literature, C.S. Lewis, Tolkien, Isaac Asimov, or more recently, the Bobbyverse, to the sense of the sublime brought to the screen by George Lucas or Peter Jackson. These giants raised me, filled my imagination. At some point, a small human, me, whispered, hey, maybe I should tell a story too. A story about what I love and how I see it. Space. Tropes to embrace. Tropes to twist. Tropes to reject altogether. The supreme transgression against works that felt sacred. And of course, games, since I was 6 years old. Video games have carved paths in my imagination. Star Fox, Mass Effect, Zelda, Skies of Arcadia, Baton Kaitos, Golden Sun. Even smaller gems like Faster Than Light or Hades added fuel to the fire. They gave me visions, desires, worlds to inhabit, and eventually the courage to build one of my own. What emerged was not just a world, but also a structure, a vision, and a meditation on what might have been and what might still be. Following the words of the Emperor in Star Wars Rebels, perhaps a poor example, but one I cannot resist, this is what was, and this is what will be, and this is what will never be. That's not exact. I need to change this. You see? Alive. Actually, the first part was correct. Wait a minute, dear reader, if you are listening to this, I'm actually modifying a little part of the book. There you go. Now that's better. I cannot shake off these influences, which dominate not only my imagination, but that of much of the 21st century. And perhaps I shouldn't try. Because what I wanted to write was something vast, terrible, and luminous. A mirror, a dream, and perhaps too a prophecy. A story about the imaginary world, the present moment, and one possible version of the future. Science fantasy is a strange animal. It speaks to what will never happen, but if you allow yourself to bend the universe, it becomes a way to play with ideas hidden in the realm of what we don't know, we don't know. But how? How can one allow such transgression? What separates science from the ridiculous? How can magic return to the world? Or perhaps the question is simpler. Did magic ever left? Ever leave? At a time when technology and AI seem increasingly indistinguishable from magic, as Arthur C. Clarke once said, maybe it is time to open ourselves once again to wonder. This is the book of one man measuring himself against giants in the language that shaped his views, his life, and his hopes. Bon voyage. Then there are maps and compendium. Okay, I can actually show you on the screen. All right, let me try to focus. So this is the spiral. In the ebook version, it's clearer. I did my best with the printed one. No, do not change it, please. This is the population of the Aurimion, different groups. I'm going to present them along the way. Note Cartarno, the spiral, different populations, and we arrive to glossary. Glossary. Oh, you who draw near the spiral, behold the tale that awaits you. The glossary rises before you, but you need not read it right away. Oh, visitor of the spiral, step forward without fear. You will return to it again and again, always here, never quite the same. Oh, reader of the spiral, until now, the glossary is no barrier. It is only a friend, waving to you as you pass. Return the greeting and continue your path. Oh, citizen of the spiral. Preface. From a very young age, I spent summers in a red tiled house in Portugal. The house belonged to my grandparents, and it was full of light, life, and wonder. There was a fig tree that brushed against the balcony, offering its fruits to curious hands or mischievous ones, when my brother and I threw them into the neighbor's garden. My grandmother always defended us, of course, because that's what grandmothers do. When I was 6 years old, we went again to this house in Porto. In my room, there was a wooden frame double bed, too big for me and with shelves that held two books I've never forgotten. One was Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, a story of impossible wonders and nonsensical rules that somehow made perfect sense. The other, The Cat of Simulambula, Le Chat de Simulambula, was stranger still, a tale of cliffs you could only enter by looking at them the right way. Maybe. I should probably reread them again. These books planted the seeds of my imagination, teaching me that the world doesn't always have to make sense to be meaningful. At 10, I read Isaac Asimov's Foundation for the first time, though I barely understood it then. When I reread it as an adult, it struck me as a retelling of the fall of the Roman Empire set in space. I admired its scope, but wondered, must every story end with collapse? Couldn't there be a future where we don't fail? My story began there, with the hope of creating a world where suffering is not inevitable. Oops. Moving on. Years later, when I was 15, I encountered the Age Chronicles, a darker, more decayed world that shocked and fascinated me. There was a place called the Twilight Woods, where broken bodies could not die. Survival, I thought, should have been a gift, but here it came at the cost of madness. These stories stayed with me, reshaping how I thought about beauty and tragedy of the human existence. But writing a story, my story, felt impossible. Not because I liked the ideas, but because my mind is a mess. I was diagnosed as gifted. But it wasn't as fun as it sounds. I didn't feel above. I felt separated, away, trapped on an island of thoughts, whereas the rest of the world seemed to have fun on the mainland. Still today I struggle to focus. My thoughts scatter like leaves in the wind. Writing has always felt like a wrestling with a storm. Messy, overwhelming, and ultimately exhausting. For years, my story played out in fragments, like an unsolvable puzzle. When AI tools became accessible, everything changed. Finally, I had something to help me stay on track. A way to take the chaos of my thoughts and mold it into structure. This book wasn't traditionally written. It was at first literally spoken, shaped, and refined with the help of AI. For a year, I told this story aloud, letting my voice guide the rhythm and flow. AI didn't just help me create, it helped me feel less lonely in the process. With time, Eventually, I started to like writing. Creating these planets, characters, dreams that were sleeping shapeless inside. I've always felt like an old duck, out of sync with the rest of the flock. I might seem social, but inside I've always felt like a deer, skittish, prone to retreat into the woods when the world became overwhelming. Speaking to a machine, strangely enough, gave me comfort. It was less messy than the human connections I've always found so difficult. For better or worse, it gave me a companion, steady and unflinching, to help bring this story to life. The spiral was created out of necessity. I feared that if I didn't tell this story, it would consume me. It was a way to give form to something that felt too large to keep inside, a way to share a part of myself that I've never been able to express otherwise. This book is my attempt to connect with others at a deeper level, to speak in ways I've always struggled to in life. I created the spiral to invite you now to step inside. Good reading. Kevin Lacoste. Chapter 0. Potato Man. There was a farm, and on this farm there was a man. He wasn't a particularly remarkable man, not very tall, not very thin, with a kind of face and hands carved by years of sun and soil. He walked his fields with a basket slung over one arm, his steps slow but steady, his boots pressing deep into the soft earth. As he moved, he mumbled to himself. "Ah, there you have it," he said, stooping to pluck a weed from between the rows. Yes, that's better now." He strengthened, pulling a small, weathered almanac from the pocket of his coat. Its cover was creased and faded, the pages smudged with dirt and fingerprints. He flipped through it with a practiced ease, glancing up at the sky. The clouds were stretched thin, the wind steady but not harsh. He ran a rough hand over his unshaven face, nodding thoughtfully. "Shouldn't be rain today," he muttered. "Could come later, though." He tapped the page, closed the almanac with a soft thud, and slid it back into his pocket. The potatoes in his basket jostled gently as he carried them to the edge of the field. "Ah, a good job done," he murmured. "Yes, it's going to look great." When the basket was full and the sun hung low, the man headed back to his house. It was made of stone, irregular and rough, as though it had been built by hands more accustomed by farming than masonry. The walls leaned ever so slightly, giving the place an air of having stood through decades of weather and work. Inside, he set the basket on the wooden table and began inspecting his harvest. One by one, he picked up the potatoes, turning them over in his hands like precious stones. "Ah, this one's good," he said, nodding with satisfaction. "Ah, this one,
Maybe for later. Yes, yes, good potato. Very good.
He hummed a quiet tune as he worked, peeling the potatoes with a small, well-worn knife. The skins fell away in curling stripes, landing in a neat pile beside him. He chopped the potatoes into chunks, tossing them into a pot of water bubbling gently on the stove. A pinch of salt, a handful of herbs from a jar on the shelf, and soon the kitchen was filled with the warm, rich aroma of soup. When it was ready, the man ladled the soup into a bowl and carried it to the table. He sat down, his movements slow and deliberate, and stared at the swirling liquid. It was brown and yellow, flecked with green, the steam curling up like a soft whisper. He dipped a finger into the bowl, tasting it.
Yes, he said, nodding to himself. That's good. Yes, indeed. Very good.
For a long time, he simply stared at the soup, watching the way the liquid moved, the way the current swirled and folded into each other. He seemed lost in thoughts, though about what only he could say. At last, he smiled.
It's a good soup,
He said softly, as if to no one in particular.
Yes, a very good soup.
And with that, he took his spoon and began to eat. Part 1. Aurimion. Chapter 1. The Spiral. Witness a book from above. Open it and let its pages flow. Join the cover to the back. And make it slowly spin. You might see a spark here and there, a tiny or distant world, perhaps, a dot on the pages, a glimpse of a galaxy we all know. And in this book, it is called The Spiral. Now look closer, and look at its arms. You may know them, or you may not. But here you see that they are not equal, not all of them. Two are bigger and more intense, and two are fainter in between. And somewhere and somewhen, a small planet will change the galaxy. It is not a unique galaxy by any means. Just another shiny stone among countless others, scattered across the endless void. But one would dare to complain in the face of such infinite beauty? Among the countless galactic roses, the spiral stands out, making honor to its sisters. It rests there almost delicately, as if placed upon the black velvet of space by two white-gloved hands that wouldn't dare touch it, a fair and terrible diamond, simple in its shape, yet intricate, beyond comprehension. A barred spiral with a glowing bulge of light at its core, simple, yes, but with
a mind of its own, with depths so impossible to fathom that an ant aspiring to reach the moon might have a better chance of success. But look! What is it? It is as if three lights fell from afar, touching the shiny stone of the spiral, and change it, its rules, its mind. Whatever its name was before, the Astors gave birth to the spiral, as they, Astors, and the galaxy became one. Let's get closer. The Astors arrived as castaways from a shipwreck from another. Something. A galaxy, a universe, a dimension. Not even they could say for certain. They fell into the vast expanse of the spiral, landing among its countless worlds. In their descent, they found humanity teetering on the edge of destruction, torn between their brilliance and insatiable urge for self-doom. The Astors helped humanity to escape their misery, to rise from the ashes of their endless conflicts. Out of this pain were born the three humans, Kreas, Synth, and Intus. Kreas, the bearer of the organic legacy, still tied to their brutal origins, descendants of the apes that once fought against themselves for dominance, changing, remembering, but instinct-driven, embodying Earth's raw spirit of transformation and imperfections. Synth, artificial minds in mechanical bodies, striving to overcome the flaws of flesh, yet tethered to human origins. And Intus, the enhanced animals, uplifted as a form of repentance from humanity's past mistakes, melding instinct with intellect to reconcile nature and reason. Together, these three humans form the Aurimion, a galactic empire spanning the spiral under the guidance of the three Astors. In the 100th century, this empire represented the convergence of countless worlds, a unity built out of diversity, reaching out to the stars with hope, ambition, and the wisdom passed down by their mysterious guardians. Yet, not all agreed. In the darkest places of the spiral, cracks began to appear. And for many eons, if you listened closely, you could hear it. A change in the heart of the spiral, a whisper of the soul, an ill wind that said, enough talking. And yet, the spiral spin. Chapter 2. Coffee. I didn't have one today. Coffee was getting ready. Berta, in her sleep, knew it. It was stronger than her. She was the first one to recognize that she could be a bit grumpy here and there. Well, just sometimes. Alright, she did have a bad temper, and especially in the morning. But was it her fault that the universe was so disappointing? But then... there was coffee. And it somehow made up for all the turmoil of existence. It was inaccurate to say that Berta loved coffee. Think more as if an evil dark being entity from the depth of hell found her, and in a Faustian pact she gladly and willingly not sold, but offered her soul to the pleasure of being addicted to coffee, and that for all eternity. Which in turn would have confused the aforementioned caffeinated devil, that would have shown that, my good sir, definitely people's sense of values and common sense were not at all what they were before, during the golden days of coffee corruption. And where is going the world and society, may I ask? Anyway, hot coffee was more than a beverage. It was a summoning. Therefore, Berta woke up. It was early morning on Singovia station. Well, sort of. Morning was not as you might imagine. It wasn't determined by the relative position of the station to the light side of Perisea, the moon of the Astorian planet Bor, illuminated by their shared sun, Jaravos. Yet, sun or no sun, Berta was a creature of habit, and she could already feel her body stiffening and tense because of the station rumbling of tourists. Many Kreas and Itus were inviting her home and diplomatic assignments from her planet. Why? By the Astors, why accept tourists in a spinometric station? A little change here, please. Be patient. All right. Gone was the peace and silence of contemplation that allowed speedometrists to do their job and observe the reaction of the citrus-colored moon and its strange behavior in the spiral, modified laws of reality. Let's head to the glossary. To check spinometry. Spinometry. Knowledge. The gathering of knowledge trying to understand the subjective nature of the spiral. Spinometrists look at it. It looks at them back. Let's get back to the chapter. She sighed again. A creature of habit. Creature and territorial indeed, she thought, rising out of bed and going towards the kitchen of her apartment in the official personal area that was also on the touristic path of visits in the station. Creature indeed, she repeated in her mind, while combing without conviction the golden and long fur of the top of her head with a 5-fingered and hairy hand, and putting on shimmering green pants and a vest of brown pattern and bronze details that she bought on Sargara, the inner farmer world gravitating closer to Jaravos than Bo was, distant from its dim white dwarf star. Beta was an Intea, or more precisely an Into and an enhanced animal. Animal? What a gross word, she thought. Into humans that went through enhancements were usually thinking of themselves as Ias or Inteas. She didn't even remember having heard anyone endorse the name of animal. Gross. Well, there were always feralists, but again, she thought, you just can't do anything about some people. She got closer to the counter of the kitchen where the coffee maker was located. It was not a very high counter, but again, they could adjust to the heights of the apartment inhabitant. In this case, Canis, Felican, Intea and Aurimion of the Aurimion Empire, named Bertha and not taller than about 5 feet tall or 1 meter 50.
Stupid labels,
she thought. She took a sip and then said out loud,
"Ah, that's the stuff."
Then she shivered and spoke to the empty room.
Everyone! Everyone! What are you doing with the heat system? Giving it to the tourist again?
Amazing. Why have an omnipresent godlike entity leading the galaxy if he doesn't show up when we need it? It must only mean one thing, and Bertha didn't like it at all. He was ignoring her. She waited for a moment, tapping the floor with her foot impatiently, her arm crossed, and just threw them in the air out of frustration in front of the visible lack of empathy of the Astor with a clearly mistreated diplomat. "I know what you're doing, you know!" The silence and emptiness of the room was glad to learn about it. She finally gave up, and after wearing some warmer clothes and bringing the trash bag with her, she went out of her flat and into the large galleries that served as streets of the residential zone. Chapter 3. A Galaxy at Peace. It was early morning, but already crowds of tourists were taking advantage of the new open doors of the Azurian station, circling the pink and yellow moon with its bands of severed green mountains, gleaming eerily on the darkened side. The station, first created as an observation point for how the Astorian physics were affecting the moon, was soon to be known as the best vantage point to witness the elegance and renowned beauty of the Topaz Moon, as it was sometimes called. The Blue Tiles station, as it was covered by millions of them for a reason that only spinometrists could explain, sometimes you're going to hear me do a pause when I speak about spinometry, because I've changed the name of the science itself, and there are parts where it seemed that I forgot to include the change. That's why. Let me get back to it. The Blue Tile station, as it was covered by millions of them for a reason that only spinometrists could explain, was slowly rotating on itself, as well as around the moon, so that each pass revealed a slightly different perspective for the pleasures of Singovia's tourists, that were slowly bothering a different area of the station, following its slow dance.
A stupid idea altogether,
thundered Bertha in her mind, seeing her front door invaded by a group of Felis tourists, a type of Intus, mainly Tigs, with one of them taking a picture of her. She felt as if she wanted to murder her surroundings. Yet, and because she was sure that Ereban would not look favorably on such an act, she decided to swallow her frustration and move forward through the crowd. Many Intus tourists were present today. Mostly Felicans, the leading human groups of Intus, made of a mix of Felis and Canis ascendants. You could also see some Kreas here and there, Neutrals and Demons mainly. No purist, but that was hardly a surprise so far away from the Queendom. And she was sure that you could find some embodied synth here and there. Well, focused were everywhere, of course, but as being obsessed with logistics and maintenance of everything and everyone and technically humans as everyone else, well, they didn't count as tourists, Bertha decided. She threw the trash into the bin and nearly bumped into a couple, a neutral and a face, walking hand in hand but taking a lot of space and calling some friends coming from away. Too much noise, too many people! Enough is enough, she said out loud. There were definitely too many tourists. How could everyone allow a research station to fall into the hands of tourism? A plague, that's what it was! She called out loud. Ereban! Ereban, I know you're here, old man. What are you doing right now? She asked the room in general. A voice suddenly spoke out of thin air and materialized as a butler walking beside her with a characteristic still posture and raised eyebrow. Well, you know that I'm always doing something somewhere, but let me humor you. My main focus at the moment is located 2 systems away, trying to figure out what is going on with a strange flux in the stream of dark matter beyond her gaze. Well, but don't mind. The comment made Berta reconsider her next comment and decided to go with curiosity.
Isn't it unusually calm?
Asked Berta, perplexed. Indeed, answered Ereban. The colonization is going well. No specific conflict between purists and intus or demons, which is unusual. Zealots are not doing any outrageous demand. It is a very calm day, as one may say, in the spiral.
Well, then maybe you might have a better luck than me. Asking the archivist to release the last study from Periter about the 35th century Felis and Canis united as one species. I needed to convince Sargeras Planeden to finally approve a cultural exchange between Intus of Earth and them.
Why is it required? Said Ereban, getting somehow stiffer, mentioning the leader of Sagara, Planeden Juno.
Well, she said, and I quote,
and suddenly Berta took a high-pitched and nasal voice under the one rising eyebrow of Ereban, soon joined by its fiery companion. On the Astor's face.
It is a story that may help our 2 planets getting united in a spirit of distant yet fundamental collaboration, and should be essential for our youth, who, I am sure, would not abide the absence of such a telling in our gent speech,
told Berta with fury.
I can't deal with this woman, Ereban. How did she even get the position? It's just a student exchange. We're not going to war.
To this, Ereban sighed and closed his eyes and murmured. That is what you wanted. He pinched his nose with 2 fingers and continued. You wanted to be the butler of the galaxy, Ereban. All right, Berta. But I will not get my hopes too high with the archivist. He has revealed himself to be even more difficult than usual at sharing records nowadays.
What's up with that?
Asked Berta, suddenly growing even more curious. It is a long story, answered Ereban dismissively. Anyway, were you not looking for Marco? Asked Ereban, changing subject.
Oh, yes! He escaped one of my lectures. Again. But I will find him,
she answered with the determination of a hunter following a prey for miles and miles. Poor Marco, answered Ereban, almost afraid of Berta. I may have to tell him to hide better.
God or not, do not mess with me,
she answered with a threatening finger. Well, first, I am not a god, as I told you many times, but an entity from an unknown space and of an unknown nature, answered Ereban with a growing smile, looking out a window towards Perisea. And second, I haven't seen him today. He must be somewhere on the station. The old butler added, his gaze lost in the darkness of space.
First, what a mouthful. Sounds just like a god to me. Second, you haven't seen him,
said Berta with contempt.
"You're Nastor! You know everything! You could perfectly check and find where one of any 10 million bugs on the station is," she said with a smirk. "It's just that you don't want to do it, hmm?"
Exactly, said Eriban with a calm yet impassioned manner, blowing some dust off her surface close to the window he was gazing upon. "And let me remind you, once again," he said, like a patient teacher, "that I'm not a god. And I have no intention of looking over the shoulder of everyone as some sort of disembodied overlord," he said suddenly with a more serious tone, looking over his glasses.
"You are everywhere all the time,"
she added with the same tone. "Wrong again. I am, mostly, everywhere in the spiral, but yes, I can certainly fix your room temperature if this can stop this arguing about my nature, please," answered the Astor. "And," he adjusted his vest here and suddenly looked at Berta with a satisfied smirk, "I just informed Marco of your arrival." And with that disappeared with an audible pop, whereas Berta continued to walk, grumbling. Chapter 4. Care for your garden. Marco was hiding, thanks to Ereban, the butler of the galaxy, that warned him. After all, he was always on the look for information and was known to be the spy of the galaxy or its defender. Always on the look for strange phenomena. Pulsars outburst, pirates in the outskirt, and herald of the Aurimion expansion. In the spiral, there was only 2/3 conquered. There's a little mistake here. Marco felt pretty close to Ereban, as he saw him as a father figure. He wasn't very close to his own father on Pamoja. He would listen to Ereban's lectures with attention that were more like tales than the ordeals Berta could engrave in his mind, until he would even dream afterwards of the new knowledge forced in his brain. They had met a few years ago on the station. Her, a seasoned Felican diplomat from Earth, and him, a young Kriya student specialized on interhuman dynamics from Pamoja. He was, as a good third of all Kriyas, unnatural. He measured around 1.70 m, had auburn hair, and a fair share of biological and synthetic modifications that could include a made of steel resistance against disease, a virtually infinite lifespan, and, as it was the case for most individuals in the spiral, and a ton of focus and OOTs dealing with the business of his mainly biological body functions. Focused and OOTs belong to the third type of humans, beside Intus and Kriyas, known as Synth. Synth came from Earth, as the other two did, and were bound by the same rights and duty as any human. They could coexist in networks on gigantic servers, manage menial tasks for the good functioning of interhuman institutions, or dedicate themselves to the good inner functioning of Intu, Synth, or Kriya systems or individuals. As nanobeings inside his body, Marco's focused and OOTs were not particularly interested in interacting with their host, and were definitely not interested, Marco even tried, by small talks. As Synth, focused usually preferred to stay focused. They found the task of maintaining his health interesting, as they did for almost everything and everyone in the Aurimion, and so every task as a sort of, let's say, engineering challenge. and everyone accepted them as they got obvious benefit out of the deal. That is to say, body enhancement, modifications, and transformations, being functional or aesthetics. All these people, these humans, were called Aurimians, under the power of the Astors, the three leaders of the Aurimion. Kreas, Synth, and Intus formed the trifecta known as the Three Humans. And everybody was happy. Wow. Almost everybody. From the second type of modification, the aesthetic ones, Marco had a pair of tiny stubbles of horns that peeked out of his forehead, a clear admired of the fiend aesthetics from demonic Kreas. He had slightly pointier teeth than usual for a troll and very pointy ears that were considered trendy on Pamoja. Overall, he was considered a good-looking man and quite normal for an Aurimion of the 100th century. When identity and a style, a fandom, did usually not just stop at a different type of clothing or change of appearance, but a more or less profound transformation of the flesh, which was a common thing for everyone, really. Well, almost. Marco himself had a hard time understanding it all. Dealing with opposite worldviews was mainly Besta's job, whereas he just recently graduated. They both lived in the same gallery street in the residential area of Singovia Station, and have been friends on the artificial structure for the last 5 years. He amused her and brightened her mood. She grounded him and opened his mind on the bigger galaxy. Yet, now was not the time, as coffee was unusually and dangerously low on the station. Nowadays, it became increasingly rare due to the trade negotiation with Sargara's planetend that was being surprisingly difficult. So Marco was hiding away from Beta's black mood. His secret place was one of water and life. It was located in one of the lower stages on the station, in one of the blue gardens, where plants were using a different type of photosynthesis. The huge collection of gardens exposed to the particularly intense Astoria-modified physics was subdivided into many different sections from different planets, systems, and lights among the vast variety of ecosystems in the galaxy. He was now looking at a very particular sparkling hibiscus flower. What a strange thing nature had made here. Well, nature. It was not really sure nature that was all responsible here. The truth is that no one knew exactly, or everyone disagreed about what the original hibiscus looked like. Between Intus, Kreas, and Synth, everyone had left their footprint on the poor plant and rooted, floating in the void of space. Yet, thriving. And as strange and mutated as the hibiscus was, it was probably one of the most common plants of all. It was the greatest success of this now pan-galactic plant. And even if some would consider its downfall. Suddenly, Marco heard a voice of Beta in the garden booming.
Enough stinking around! Come up here. There is a lot of work to be done with Sagara.
To this, Marco groaned. Ah, how did you find me? He said, speaking to the room.
You think I survive as a diplomat? How? You have much to learn before you can outsmart me, Marco.
Suddenly, Marco heard the voice of Berta change, as if she was talking to someone else.
What? What do you want? No, I definitely do not want ticket to visit the Perseus Expedition Center. Why? Because I am one of the people that helped build it.
Then some shuffling.
I'm going to kill this tourist, Marco. Cafeteria, now!
And she hung up. Great, thought Marco. She's going to be in the best mood ever. For sure. And with that, he got towards the lift, regretting not having chosen any anti-beta enhancements. Chapter 5. Smuggling. On his path to the cafeteria, Mako was lost in thoughts. It was hard for him to pinpoint exactly why, but something kept him troubling him. At a corner, he found Eriban watering some plants in the hallway.
Ah, good morning, Mako. How are you today?
Hello, Eriban. Good, and you? Thank you for your help hiding me, even if... And Mako grimaced. It wasn't enough, said Mako with a pleading grunt. Eriban laughed. I regret to inform you that Berta is outside my so-called godly powers. I should have employed her in the defense department ages ago, said Eriban, half joking, half considering the possibility. Please don't, answered Mako with horror. Who knows how she would use such a power? Mako, terrified and pensive, looked at each other for several seconds while not saying anything, holding their respective position. And then they laughed. Well, said Mako, I better get going. Oh, wait. Take this. It is dangerous to go without coffee, said Eriban, throwing him a small package. What is? Asked Mako. Oh! He continued, surprised. Yes, if I cannot get my hands on it despite Planet and Juno's willingness to make everything way more complicated than it should be, well, she would deserve my position then. The remark made Mako laugh. So you are the Spiral's butler, spy, and smuggler? Asked Mako, winking at Eriban. I don't think Athania and Iapetus would tolerate Juno for long as an Astor, continued Mako, laughing even more. I would neither confirm nor deny your first affirmation, answered Eriban with a broadening smile. The Astor definitely had a soft spot for Mako, his curiosity and wits. And no, it would not be indeed a good idea to unleash our dear partner from Sargara into the spiral. We should then satisfy ourselves containing the betas and the Junos of the galaxy with the trinkets and caffeine that they seem to be bother us with, sighed Eriban. Mako suddenly had a feeling of sympathy for the butler. I guess you have more of those in your pocket, right? He said softly and with pity. Eriban became somber. You have no idea. I am dealing with thousands of them right now. But anyway, it could be worse. And look, he said, showing the plant he was giving water to. It already feels better. He continued with an expression of satisfaction. People like you, Marco, he said, turning to Mako with stiffness, yet emotion in his eyes, as if it was usually uncommon to see. You are my water. And Mako held the Astor's shoulders with affection and smiled at him. The moment passed, and then he sighed. Well, the dragon is waiting, and she needs her ration of coffee, Mako said, pretending to stutter. Eriban laughed, and then, with a friendly wave of the hand, he disappeared. Going back to his duties of guiding the spiral, of which he was both the master and slave. Marco, after looking at the spot where the Astor stood for a while, suddenly got out of his reverie and, thinking about Berta's mood, hurried toward the cafeteria. Coffee could not wait. Chapter 6. Irritation. When Marco arrived at the cafeteria, he tried to move through the crowd. Tourists, mostly from Sagara, mainly Felicans on one side, and a smaller queue of personnel and officials visiting the station on the other. The reason for this separation wasn't so much about privilege, but about different needs. As more people were arriving to witness the beauty of Perisea and, by extension, more and more were visiting the facilities of the station. After all, a lot of kids wanted to discover how spinometry, astorials, and numerics functioned. Astorials, or Astorian modified physics, was the name for the transformed physics of the spiral, altered by the stranding and presence of the Astors, whereas spinometry was the new incarnation of subjective science. There was as well numerics for objective science, but it had somehow fallen into disarray, as the spiral itself was having fun trying to mess up with it constantly, traumatizing the naive numerists that will try to understand it. A little note here. Why do I stop all the time with spinometry and numerics? Because in the first versions, I actually switched the two names. The numerics were supposed to be this, the subjective science, something that we don't have today. The closer we have from subjective science is what we call soft sciences, psychology, sociology, and so on. And I called spinometry the subjective, the objective one. What is the legacy of science today that treats objective reality? But in this case, I thought that numerics would be too confusing, so I decided that spinometry would be the subjective science. And sometimes there is remnant of the reverse in the text, so I have to change it. The touristic route was all very pedagogic, with a constant stream of content all over the path where tourists wandered, transforming the station into an educational experience, offering views of the Jaravos system's planets and Bohr's moon, Perisea. Displays were everywhere, even in the cafeteria, showing the planet's patterns, atmosphere, main geographical features, and a study on the new phenomena. New meaning, unusual in this case. After all, it was the discovery of what happened to Perisea that made the topaz of Bohr the star of the show in his solar system. There was much to say about Bohr, its mother planet, and the incredible work being done on Singovia Station to understand why the star was born and how the astorials were affecting the surrounding physics. Yet, even in the Aurimion, money wasn't infinite. It wasn't that creating a post-scarcity society was impossible. In some way, the Aurimion was. But a level of artificial scarcity had to be maintained to encourage creativity and exchange. It was a sort of softened capitalism. This wasn't the only model in the galaxy. After all, the spiral was vast and diverse enough to tolerate exchanges with different systems. Still, it wasn't a bad model. If an urgent need threatened a society's integrity, or if suffering came from a lack of resources, provisions were made. Occasionally, people would talk about returning to free market, but historians would always remind them that markets were never truly free. They were manipulated behind the scene. Over time, the idea of free markets became something not taken seriously in the spiral. Thinking about all of this, Marco took some Ormines, the Aurimion's currency, from his pocket to buy the latest design of the day made by the kids visiting the station. Today's winning drawing was of Pericea, represented as a simple character with a very small body and a huge smiling head, arms stretched out as if preparing to fly. It was cute. Beta paid the attendant at the stand near the cafeteria entrance and, touching the design on his table, transferred it directly to Pericea. Then he entered and almost bumped into Berta. He was about to talk to her and exchange a few banalities, but she barely looked at him, rushing past, weaving through the crowd of officials. The only thing Barco caught was her muttering, "Out of my way or I'm going to kill someone!" He watched as she marched towards a section of the huge cafeteria, where the air, space, and even light seemed different. There was no physical barrier, but the texture of the atmosphere itself hinted at separation. The cafeteria was lavish, with bronze and gold tones and blue tiles reflecting the station's design. Though crowded with tourists, the spirometric station maintained high standards. After all, spirometry was an exciting prospect for all Aurimions in the spiral, its ideas and ventures constantly evolving, supported by the best facilities and admired by, mostly, everyone for their innovation. Marco sighed, thinking, "What a strange time to be alive," as he followed Berta with a knowing half-smile. He wasn't surprised by her frustration, but it did worry him. She was heading straight for the secluded section, and Marco knew exactly what would happen. Berta stopped, frozen, and took a deep breath. As she crossed into the space where sound became muted, the texture of her calming. Her shoulders relaxed visibly, and Marco watched her with a mix of pity and affection. No wonder she's so stressed, he thought. She seemed to be very sensitive to the tourist presence. Although it seemed to be getting worse lately. And coffee didn't help much anymore. Berta tended to reach an extra level of crankiness when the black liquid was, well, not of the best quality. And it was, Marco had to admit it, a black slush lately. All of this because of Planet Julno, complicating things beyond reasons for coffee importation from Sagara. But now Berta seemed to like the infamous beverage, and she could bite the head of anyone that would deprive her of it. Marco saw it before. When bad coffee became acceptable to her, that's when things got really dangerous. Touching the pouch that held Ereban's fresh supply of coffee, Marco felt reassured. This will soon be resolved. He made his way to her, passing through the same invisible divide that silenced the noise of the tourist-filled cafeteria. "Hey, Bella!" "What's up?" "You okay?" Marco asked nonchalantly. Beta, not buying his calm tone, shot back. "I want to kill them all." "Who?" Marco asked, playing along. "Who do you think?" Beta threw her arm in the air. "Tourists!" "What? I thought you loved Singovia Station." I did love Singovia Station," she said, exasperated. "But then this..." She struggled to find a word venomous enough for her anger. This... "You'll know!" "That woman made her mission to flood the station with her people. We could have managed a limited number of visitors, but no, how strange! I wasn't even consulted." Marco, still smiling, replied, "It's good for kids, though. They're learning about spirometry." "I know!" Beta sighed. "But that's the worst part. She knew! I couldn't say anything against it, believe me, Marco. Jono is the devil incarnated." Marco laughed awkwardly. Isn't that a bit dramatic?" "Is it?" Beta snapped, glaring at him. Okay. "Not saying anything," Marco said, holding his hands in peace. "You're right, as usual." Beta grunted, and then sat down at the table without another word. Anyway, Mako continued, trying to change the subject. I have something you might be interested in. Beta turned to look at him over a chair, starting to say, Frankly, Mako, I'm not in the mood. She stopped mid-sentence, her eyes widening. What is that? She whispered, as if hypnotized by the discovery of a golden and magical artifact. Panakavor's best blend, Mako said with a grin. The hunger was over. Interlude. A quiet, dimly lit room. A console screen flickers softly, waiting. The air feels still, as if the world itself is holding its breath. A transmission arrives. A single line of text pulses on the screen. SE. Be ready. A pause. A figure leans forward slightly, eyes narrowing, fingers moved across the interface, entering a response. VVV voice. Acknowledged. Another pause. Then the reply comes. SE. Is the sympathizer... A quiet chuckle, dry and self-assured. VV voice. The sympathizer still sinks. The words drip with superiority, annoying amusement. A few seconds of silence. Then the screen pulses again. SE. With the schedule adjustments, our friend will not be able to resist. A small nod, a faint smirk in the dim light. VV voice. I agree. A final message. SE. Meet them at the rendezvous point. VV voice. Acknowledged. The transmission ends. The figure leans back, exhaling slowly. The screen fades to black. Chapter 7. Foam. Beta was aghast. Really? She extended her trembling hands towards the coffee bag, as though expecting a figure to pass through it. After so long, with that misery of a coffee.
I need one. I need it now.
I will join you, Mako replied. They went to the resting area and prepared 2 cups. Mako also bought some Crocky Rocks, the latest trend in the spiral. They were the results of intense research involving historials. New knowledge and discovery had made it possible for Krias and other organisms to ingest and savor crystallized structures like rocks. It had been a long effort, led by a group of Inteas, demons, faces, and even some OOTs to develop Crocky Rocks. The result? A very healthy conglomerate that had made a lot of people happy with a completely new range of flavor never tasted before. It was an undebatable hit. It will be impossible to describe the sensation of eating a piece of obsidian or the savoring the soft spike of quartz. Yet, at the same time of this tale, such indulgences had become common. Mako got 2 Crocky Rocks for himself and 2 for Beta. They sat in silence once again. Glossary. Crocky Rocks. Crocky Rock. Food.
Crockerot, did you get your agates for only 8 omins? The 5 units? What are you waiting for? That's a bargain! Crockerok.
Back to the chapter. From Mako's perspective, it was always impressive to see the change in Berta's demeanor. Her body language and the way she seemed to radiate peace after her first sip of good coffee. The vampire finally gets her blood, he joked.
I would normally punish you for that with a lecture, Berta replied, lightning flashing in her tired eyes. But I know you'll just vanish before you can hear the end of it, right?
Mako chuckled, awkwardly.
Yet with such good coffee. She sighed. I don't even remember when I last had a taste of Panakavor's mutative blend. So many flavors. Have you ever been there, Mako?
No, but I love to. I've heard it's quite the, changing experience.
Well, that's one way to put it. It's hard to stay the same there, Beta said, sipping her coffee. In every sense of the word. People should know what they are dealing with. It's not the planet's fault, you know. It didn't ask for any of it.
Demons really modified the heck of it, right? Mako replied. But weren't the Astors the first to do so with the rest of the spiral?
Yeah, of course. But who knows what things would be like otherwise? I'm a result of this change.
Beta said, looking at herself. So am I. Beta looked at him up and down.
You look like a monster in old Tyrannity days.
Mako laughed. Yes, probably some supernatural being or something. Beta shook her head, unimpressed.
I'm happy to have been born in our time. Tyrannity was so limited. Can you imagine? One planet?
A bit harsh, don't you think? Mako asked, raising an eyebrow. I thought you loved Earth.
Oh, I do, Beta exclaimed. I love Earth as an integrated part of the Aurimion, but Earth nothing else. No, thank you. Feels claustrophobic.
Yeah, I guess. Mako nodded. But Terrans, well, they didn't know any better at the time, I guess.
They didn't know any better.
Beta repeated softly, nodding, her mood shifting as she stared at her coffee. Silence fell between them. Mako hesitated, sensing her unease. Beta, you seem exceptionally, struggling lately. Is something wrong? You can tell me, you know, he said gently. Beta sighed, looking down for a while at the table.
Well, some would say it's nothing.
She sipped her coffee and frowned.
But I feel like something's off.
Mako leaned in. What do you mean? Beta squirmed in her chair, searching for the right words.
It's hard to describe. I feel like something is not what it was used to. It all started with the news of people disappearing. You remember? A while ago?
Mako nodded.
You remember, it stopped for some time, and then a few months ago, it happened again, and then again. It stopped.
But, answered Mako, it's very sad, of course. But pirates are a thing, you know? Even the Astors cannot erase crimes, and, well, all humans are not collaborating as much as we would or hope. You as a diplomat know it better than anyone, so what gives? Why this time feels so different for you? Asked Mako, worried.
Everything you say is true,
answered Beta.
Yet I feel like something strange is going on, and I can't put my finger on it. It's like I got cranky one day and never came back to my normal self. And don't look at me like that, Mako. I mean crankier than usual.
Mako stayed quiet, nodding sympathetically without daring to open his mouth to comment.
They make me crazy, Mako. I swear they drive me mad.
She continued, her voice growing more intense.
Tourists!
Yeah, I know. You told me that, Mako replied, watching her closely. Beta nodded, lost in thought. Beta nodded. But the more I think about it, the more I feel like there's something. Her voice trailed off. Something? Mako asked, suddenly worried. Beta was silent for a long moment, her gaze lost in some inner thoughts. She mumbled something under her breath. Mako looked at her, worried even more. Anyway, said Beta, and she poured more coffee in Mako's cup and before drinking her own. Beta raised the cup to her lips, pausing for a moment as the scent of roast bean mixed with the damp metallic air of the station. She stared down into the liquid, noticing how the foam floated on top, delicate and cloud-like. The surface was dark, but the foam was pale beige, slowly spiraling inwards, swirling gently in circle, never quite settling. The foam created soft, curling arms that twisted and stretched, following towards the center in a silent dance. Tiny bubbles formed along the edge, then drifted aimlessly, rising up one by one. They hovered on the surface for a second, then disappeared, leaving faint ripples behind. It was almost hypnotic, the way they emerged, each one small, almost insignificant, yet catching her eyes as they briefly disrupted the calm of the liquid. The foam thickened, pulling inward, following the same slow, spiraling motion. It wasn't rushed, but steady, as though it was always been spinning in this way, caught in its own quiet rhythm. Now and then, a large bubble would form, rising to the surface like a soft pulse. These took longer to pop, as though resisting the inevitable, before slipping beneath the foam once more. And yet, as she watched, a few bubbles started to rise more quickly, as though stirred by something unseen. The calm ascent now faster, more erratic. She didn't blink. The foam's circular movement seemed endless, its pale arms curling back into themselves. One bubbles after another rose and burst, sending delicate waves through the surface, each ripples lost in the steady, ongoing spiral. Beta! Mako's voice pulled her away. The cup tilted slightly in her hands, and she blinked, lifting her gaze from the quiet storm in her cup. What? She said, blinking. Are you alright? Mako asked, his tone concerned, though his face was half hidden by the holographic screen showing a countdown and the moon Persea popping up between them. What? She muttered, strengthening up. Yeah, I'm fine. It's nothing. She glanced down at the cup again. The foam continued to spin. I'm fine. Beta waved it off dismissively, putting on a facade. Don't mind me. You don't survive as a diplomat without getting a bit paranoid. It's probably nothing, she said, laughing awkwardly, as if she herself didn't believe her own words. Chapter 8. The show begins. People were gathering around the windows. A timer on the wall began to count down as the sun and the moon Persea were about to align in a particular way, triggering the incredible phenomenon that came with its now Astorian nature. If one looked at Persea in normal conditions, they would see a moon, electric yellow and rugged, as if almost painted, its intensity unmistakable. It was not that dull yellow found on other celestial bodies. Persea was vivid, a wide landscape of towering mountains stretching across its surface. These mountains, highest in the Bohr system, were flanked by swirling clouds that seemed restless, never content to stay still. They moved, wrapping themselves around the summits like mist caught in a stream, yet on this day, twilight was near. Persea's colors shifted, with the moon now glowing in warm tones of yellow and orange, while the clouds continued to hold a strange blue and green luminescence, as if lit from within by something that had no business being there, yet there it was. The station had gone silent. Everyone was at the windows, waiting for the moment. Some tried to capture the scene with augmented eyes, gathering data from virtual cameras placed all around the moon, their eyelids flickering as they processed every angle. Others merely admired the subtle shifts, trying to imprint the mesmerizing moon in their minds. Around them, Felicans mingle, one or two demons keeping to themselves. In the Jaravo systems, Kreas were the dominant population, but they didn't care much for Persea. For them, the moon was a tiny distant dot with beautiful shifting lights they'd seen so many times through visits or hyper-realistic projections that it hardly steered their interests anymore. Even the most spectacular marvel once seen too often fades into the background. Such was the nature of the human mind, be it flesh or metal. And then it happened. The light hit the surface at a particular angle. Without any grand announcement, save for the counter on the wall, the pieces of land touched by one of the last rays of Jaravos, the sun, went completely transparent, except for a shifting yellow hue, mirroring the inner turmoil of the moon. Persea transformed into the rugged topaz of Bohr, as it was called, after its mother planet. Even if the moon itself wasn't the only celestial body undergoing such changes due to the spiral's Astorials or Astorian modified physics, it was without a doubt one of the best examples. Bohr stood in the middle of a newly colonized space within the spiral, far from the Orion spur and the overlap, making Persea one of its major attractions. And yet, the planet had nothing to be shy about and was, after all, the favorite of Astor Ereban. Its dark towers, where giant blue, red, yellow, and green crystals shone in the eternal spring nights. The city and the countryside as one, with forests and meadows, seemingly left place to sparse skyscrapers in the middle of canyons and forests. Or where residential and commercial neighborhoods shone in the tame nature of the planets, a promise of yellow welcoming light in the middle of fields. People talking into small groups in the middle of the ever-dark nature about science, politics, and arts. Bohr was the dark watchtower of the spiral, a tower of dreams and springs without end, watchful in the night, protecting the spiral as a mother caressing her child's hair that was sleeping content. And in the night sky, the topaz of Bohr, Persea, that night was shining. Even amidst the transformation, the moon's moving parts could be observed. You could identify red, white, yellow, and even pink magma flows branching in every direction underneath the surface. Lumps and chambers of the blazing hot blood of the moon extended from its heart adding to the vibrant display, with the core itself shining brighter than the small and distant dwarf star Jaravos. The phenomenon would continue for some time, even after the light faded. Though not fully understood, it captivated both speedometrists and tourists alike. There were even instances of previous visitors deciding to stay on Segovia Station to study the mysterious event. Plans were already in motion to establish a school for Perecean studies, with many applicants already registered. Berta looked around and wishing she could still feel amazed by the process. But for some reason, her mind wasn't in it today. She gently touched Marco's shoulder while he watched the spectacle with a small smile.
I think I'm going to go, she said. I need to get back to my room to think.
Marco gave her a constant smile. Berta, are you sure that...
Yeah, don't worry about me. Enjoy the show.
Chapter 9. A gnarling feeling. With that, she put her chair back and left the cafeteria. She decided to take the long route back to her flat. In various sections of the station, many windows were crowded, no, invaded, she would say, by tourists. Eventually, she wandered into empty corridors. And laboratories, where samples of rocks taken from Perecea shone under different lights, part of ongoing research. These rocks sparked numerous questions. Why did they turn transparent under certain conditions? What properties did they hold? How could they be applied to technology? And surprisingly, what benefits might they offer primals, the unenhanced intus? These parts intrigued many, particularly the Felican Society, the leading power among enhanced intus or intias. Her mind was going in loops. Something wasn't right, and somehow she felt, more than she thought, that secret pieces of a puzzle were starting to fit together. It was frustrating, as if part of herself was trapped inside a sphere of mystery, making her incredibly bitter and difficult company. She was conscious of it, but it wasn't like she wanted to be this way. She tried to stop it, to shut it down, but the call was too strong. And again, it wasn't from some sense of self-righteousness or rebellion about how she should act. It was a voice inside her that said, "You shouldn't shut me down. What I'm telling you is necessary. You have to listen to me because you and everyone around you are in danger." That was it. She thought, suddenly stopping in the middle of her street. The thought gripped her, and her pace quickened as she made her way to her room. There was danger. But a danger of what? She paused. Opening the door, she set the bag of coffee aside, automatically moving toward the coffee maker. As she picked up the bag, she stared at it for a long moment, then asked, "What are you trying to tell me?" But the bag looked back at her silently, as any bag would. She grunted in frustration, trying several times to make a cup of coffee, but her hand refused to cooperate. It was very unusual, completely uncharacteristic of her to reject coffee. She paced around, unable to sit still, then decided to go to the terrace. She stepped outside into space. A commentary on the resilience of organic bodies in the Aurimion. In someone from another time, quite far in the past, saw this scene, alarm bells would ring. Why a terrace in space? What about pressure? What about breathing? What about Berta's body? Was this the danger she felt? The answer was no. Her body, thanks to augmentations, very common in the Aurimion, was impervious to the dangers of space. With the merging of focused enhancements and OOTs, humans had become creatures of space, and space became another garden. The terrace was more like a shared balcony. Connected to several flats, she gazed at Pericea and the distant sun, a small blue pinprick in the darkness, brighter than the surrounding stars. She softly spoke a name.
Mijai,
She said to no one in particular. Moments later, Mijai appeared as an hologram, her edges slightly blurry.
Hey, Beta.
Said Mijai, stepping closer. What's up?
Hey Mijai.
The newcomer was a Felican, more specifically Felis.
How is your research on the pyramids going?
Well, we're still uncovering new information from Terran times. It's fascinating, you know?
I guess, replied Beta, more out of politeness than genuine interest.
Have you destroyed the station yet?
Mijai asked with a smirk.
No, not yet.
Beta replied, glancing upward as if waiting the option.
I can't deal with this tourist anymore, you know?
Yeah, I know. You tell me that every time we talk,
Mijai said with a knowing smile.
Yeah, sure.
Beta muttered, clearly annoyed. Mijai, familiar with Beta's moods, waited a moment before asking,
Is everything alright?
I was with Marco, you know?
Beta said, in the cafeteria.
Ah, you students, right?
Not really my student. It's more like I teach him.
That sounds like a student to me,
said Mirka, grinning.
He's not studying diplomacy. He's studying interhuman dynamics.
And you know a lot about that, don't you?
I do,
Beta said.
Be careful not to pass on your cynical views of the spiral.
It's not cynicism, it's realism.
Yeah, sure.
Mijai said, shaking her head. The silence stretched between them. Mika, now more serious, looked at her friend and asked,
Beta, are you sure you're right?
Beta said, hesitating.
I don't know. Or maybe I know that I don't feel right.
Is this about...
Nah, it's not about the tourists. It has nothing to do with them.
Beta paused.
I was actually fine at the beginning when they came. But now I'm just so annoyed and frustrated, like trying to scratch an itch that never goes away.
Then what is it?
I can find it.
Am I losing my touch?
Beta asked the void.
Did you ask Spalia about it?
Yes.
What did she say?
Well, she made a joke.
Yeah, that sounds like Spalia.
Mijai looked around, changing the subject.
Nice terrace you have got here.
Can enjoy it, you know.
Beta said, gesturing vaguely as if to show her state of mind.
Well, you should have chosen archaeology. As I told you many times, the offer still stands, you know?
Mijai teased. Beta gave a small, raw laugh, the first that broke through the conversation.
I prefer to talk to living people. And look where it's gotten you.
Mijai smirked. They both chuckled. But then Beta looked away again, her mood sinking.
Listen, Mijai,
Beta said seriously.
I called you, and I don't even know why. But be careful.
What?
Mijai frowned, suddenly concerned.
Careful of what?
I don't know, Beta admitted, her voice lower. I just have this sense that something is in motion. Something is coming. And it's going to affect me, you, and everyone around us.
Come on, Beta. How could you possibly...
I don't know! Beta interrupted. I don't know. But tell me this. Have I ever had a wrong intuition before? Mijai stayed silent. Her feline eyes, unblinking, held Beta's gaze for a long moment.
What do you want me to do?
Prepare, Beta said. Spalia, despite all her jokes, is already getting the ship ready. Keep your eyes open and... Beta felt it before she heard it. A change in the air texture, a shivering. What is... Suddenly, a tremor. Ripple through the station. Voices, far off, starting shooting.
Beta! Beta, can you hear me? Are you...
Mika's voice cut out as the transmission went dead. Another tremor, then the lights went out. And that is enough for today. I actually read way more in English than what I did with my first reading in Spanish. I really enjoyed the reading. This book is a bit of a cliff. You kind of need to get into the vocabulary and so on. The book itself is going to explain as well words that you do not understand. The glossary is present as well in the book. So, again, that is like a first taste of the 10th first chapter. I am going to read everything. I took the decision because I want people to get into this world and to interact with it. If you want to support me, of course, buying one version of the book, whereas it's an ebook or the physical one, it's going to help, of course. But I hope as well to be able to monetize the channel and to reach a point where there is a community around the book, around its universe. I need to feel that people get in the book, get in all of it, explore, ask questions about what is going on and so on, or take some, make it their own, basically. This is what is going to motivate me to do more content, more stories, more musics, more, who knows, film, series, depending on how it grows. But for now, it feels like a lonely fortress or an empty cathedral, as I like to say. And I need to feel there are people on board as well, following it, interacting with it. I'm very, very happy to have written this book, but it took a toll on me, on my health, on my sleep, and it changed me in many ways, and it gave me something. I gave to myself something that is precious, which is, this book is a bit like a mirror. It's a mirror towards me. It's a mirror towards AI as a being. Whereas it is one in the present or in the future. As the birth of new sciences that I think will appear eventually. As the biological human society
and I'm saying this way on purpose. It is as well a new take on sci-fi. I felt like sci-fi was starting to get a bit stale, with tropes that repeat themselves, and that's why science fantasy is a better fit for me. Because I don't think we really understand space. I think we have a representation of space, and we have a limited understanding of space. But as it was already said in the past, there is what I know that I know, but then there is as well what I know that I don't know, and there is as well what I don't know that I don't know. The thing that I'm not even aware that I do not know them, which is mind boggling. Anyway, thank you for listening. If you reach this level, this point in the story, I will definitely read everything. It's as much as I can tell right now, it is the work of my life. It's my baby, honestly, and I hope to see it grow. So, thank you from the Technomago to have explored the spiral, and I will see you next time. Bye.